I had never known what true fear felt like until that night, when the world turned against me. The soldiers called me a traitor. The townsfolk called me a liar, and I was just a woman running barefoot through a canyon that seemed to swallow the moonlight whole. The fall from Gracet began 2 nights earlier in Fort Hamilton, a small outpost on the edge of Apache territory. I worked as a teacher there, teaching soldiers' children how to read and write. My life was simple, safe, and small, until Captain Harrow went missing. When they found his bloodied horse near the river, someone had to take the blame. I had been the last person to speak to him, and rumor spread like fire. They said I had led him into an Apache ambush. They said I'd betrayed the fort. I didn't even have time to defend myself. They burst into my cabin at midnight, tied my hands, and dragged me before the major. His words still burned in my ears. A woman who sides with savages deserves no trial. I ran before dawn, slipping from the barracks and into the wilderness with nothing but a torn dress and the echo of my own heartbeat. Into the wild. The desert was not kind. The air was sharp and dry, each step slicing at my feet. I stumbled across redstone and coyote tracks, praying for a miracle, or at least a place to die quietly. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of hooves. Soldiers, maybe. My breath came out in ragged bursts as I darted through a narrow canyon. The walls rose high on both sides, painted in blood-colored dust. Then came silence, the kind that hums with danger. A shadow moved above me, silent, watching. I thought it was a vulture until it shifted, crouched, and leapt down. The stranger with black eyes, he landed in front of me with a grace that didn't belong to this world. Tall, bronze-skinned, with long black hair that glinted like obsidian. An Apache warrior, spear in hand, eyes like still water. I stumbled backward, clutching a rock. "Please," I gasped. "Don't hurt me," he said nothing. Just studied me as if deciding whether I was a ghost or prey. Then his gaze dropped to my wrists, still raw from the rope burns. Something flickered in his eyes, a hint of confusion, maybe pity. He said a few words in his language I didn't understand, then motioned for me to follow. I shook my head, but when he gestured again, I realized he wasn't asking. Between fear and mercy, he led me through the canyon, his pace steady but watchful. Once he stopped to listen to the wind. Then I heard it too. Distant hooves echoing through stone. The soldiers' panic clawed my throat. I turned to run, but he caught my arm, pulling me behind a boulder. He pressed a hand to my mouth and whispered one word in broken English. "Quiet." I could feel the heat of his palm, smell the leather and smoke on his skin. The soldiers rode past, cursing my name, promising to drag me back for a proper hanging. Only when the sound faded did he release me. I collapsed to my knees, trembling. Why help me?" I whispered. He didn't answer, only looked at me with an unreadable calm. Then he turned toward the horizon where the first gray hint of dawn touched the rocks. "You come," he said finally, "or you die." And with that I followed him, not out of trust, but because death was closer behind me than he was ahead. Crossing into the sacred lands as daylight broke. The canyon opened into a hidden valley, green and wild, where the earth itself seemed untouched by war. I knew from whispered stories that this was forbidden land, Apache ground sacred to their spirits. The warrior paused at the edge, turned to me and said a single name, Taza. It was his name, or perhaps a warning. I repeated it softly, unsure if I was now his prisoner or something worse. He nodded once, as if sealing a vow between us. That morning, as the sun rose over the red cliffs, I realized I had crossed not just into Apache land, but into a world I did not understand. And though I didn't know it then, the man who had captured me would soon become the only person who truly believed my innocence. And the night I would confess that innocence would become sacred. When I woke, the world was quieter than I'd ever known. No drums of war, no hooves, no shouts, only wind moving through the cottonwoods and the murmur of water somewhere close. I was lying on a bed of woven grass beneath a shelter made of hides. My dress was torn. My hands were bound loosely in front of me. Not cruelly, but as if someone wasn't sure whether I'd try to run or simply vanish. And outside I heard them. Voices. Apache voices. Deep, rhythmic, powerful. Among the people of silence. When I stepped outside the shelter, the entire world seemed to stop and look at me. Women grinding maize, children playing near the fire, warriors sharpening blades or painting their horses. They stared with hard, unreadable faces. I was the enemy, a white woman in their sacred valley. Taza stood near the center, speaking to an older man with hair silvered by the sun. His father, I realized, the chief of this small band. The older man's eyes lingered on me with suspicion that felt sharp enough to cut. He said something to Taza, too fast for me to catch. Taza answered quietly. I didn't know what words passed between them, but the elder's expression darkened. Finally, he approached me, speaking in broken English. Why you here? My mouth went dry. I was hunted, I whispered. I didn't mean to come here. I ran and I looked at Taza. He saved me. The old man grunted, eyes narrowing. Soldiers hunt you. Why? I hesitated. The truth was too heavy. They think I did something I didn't do. He studied me a moment longer, then turned to Taza and barked an order. 2 women came and led me away, not roughly, but with the kind of firm hands that didn't leave room for argument. I wasn't a guest. Not yet. The language of eyes, the women were kinder than I expected. One of them, small with soft eyes and a knowing smile, brought me food, roasted corn and water sweetened with cactus fruit. She said her name was Nita. She tried to teach me words, simple ones. Water, eat, sleep, thank you. The Apache language felt like wind over stone, fluid, but strong. I stumbled through it, earning small laughs from the children who gathered around, fascinated by my pale skin and tangled hair. But Taza, he watched me differently. Whenever I looked his way, he was there, silent, unreadable, studying. I couldn't tell if he trusted me or not. Sometimes I caught him speaking with his father, and I could feel the tension in their voices. The old man didn't want me here, I didn't blame him. Whispers of the sacred. That evening I sat near the edge of the camp, watching the sun melt into the horizon. The air smelled of sage and smoke. Nita sat beside me, humming a low tune. She pointed to the mountains in the distance, dark blue silhouettes against the orange sky. Sacred, she said softly. No white man go there. I nodded, sensing her meaning, and those lands were holy. Then she pointed toward me. You sacred? The question startled me. I shook my head. No, I'm just lost. But she only smiled as if she knew something I didn't. Later that night I saw Taza kneeling before the fire, painting white lines on his chest and arms. He was preparing for something, a ritual maybe. I watched from the shadows, caught between fear and fascination. When he finally stood, his eyes met mine through the darkness. For a heartbeat, everything around us disappeared, the fire, the songs, the fear. Only the quiet pull between 2 souls who shouldn't have met at all. Between judgment and kindness. The next morning, Taza brought me a small bundle of herbs. He said one word, medicine. I took it hesitantly. For me? He nodded. It was for the burns on my wrists, the ones the soldiers had left. His touch was careful as he applied the paste, cool and soothing. I tried not to flinch. You run far, he said quietly, his English rough but gentle. Why they hunt you? I told him then, haltingly, painfully, on about the captain, about the lies, how I was accused of helping the Apache kill a man I'd never harmed. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he looked away, eyes fixed on the hills. They lie much, he murmured. Soldiers, it wasn't sympathy. It was understanding, the kind that comes from seeing too much of the same cruelty. For the first time, I felt a strange safety near him. Not comfort, not yet, but the kind of peace that comes when someone finally believes you're not what the world says you are. The ritual of trust at dusk. Drums began to echo through the valley. The air thickened with the scent of sage and cedar. Nita came to me with a long strand of beads and gestured for me to follow her to the central fire. The entire tribe gathered there. Warriors stood tall and silent. The chief sat beside the flames, his face like carved stone. Taza stood across the fire, bare-chested, his skin painted white and red. He raised his hand and spoke in his language, strong, steady words that carried across the camp. I didn't understand, but I felt the weight of it. The chief's gaze burned into me as he spoke next. Then Taza turned toward me and said in English, he says you stay. 1 moon, if you lie, you die. If you true, spirits protect you. My heart pounded. I nodded slowly. I am telling the truth, I said, my voice trembling. I am innocent. The fire crackled between us, throwing light across Taza's face. For the first time, I saw him smile. Not in mockery, but in something like quiet recognition. Then, he said softly, you live under sacred night. The people began to sing, low, haunting melodies that rolled through the valley. I felt tears sting my eyes, though I didn't know why. That night I slept beneath a sky full of stars, surrounded by strangers who saw me as a question, not a person. But somewhere in that silence I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could find redemption here. And though I didn't yet understand the meaning of Taza's words, I would soon learn that for his people, truth and purity were not mere word, they were sacred. And when the time came for me to confess my innocence completely, that sacred truth would bind us forever. The moon rose full and white that night, so bright it turned the desert into silver. The wind whispered through the canyon like a song I almost remembered. I couldn't sleep. It had been 3 weeks since Taza brought me into his people's camp. The first days were filled with silence and fear. Now, they were filled with questions I was too afraid to ask. Why did he save me? Why did he look at me that way? Not with pity, not with desire, but with something older, deeper, like he saw through the walls I'd built around my heart. Shadows of the past that day, a group of scouts returned from the south, bringing with them something that shattered what little peace I had found. A soldier's insignia, torn from a uniform. I recognized it immediately, the crest of Captain Harrow's company. My pulse quickened. The same men who had hunted me were close, the same men who had murdered him and blamed me. When the scouts laid the insignia before the chief, the camp fell silent. Taza knelt beside it, his jaw tight. Then his father looked at me. You say you not lie, he said in his broken English. Now soldiers come again, maybe for you, maybe for us. The weight of guilt crushed me. I tried to speak, but my throat locked. I never meant to bring danger here, I whispered. Please believe me. The chief's eyes softened only slightly. Then you pray your spirit clean, he said, before sun go down again. And with that, he rose and walked away, leaving Taza and me alone with the silence between us. Su, the weight of innocence. I spent that entire day helping Nita grind maize, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. Every shadow felt like a soldier's rifle. Every whisper in the wind felt like accusation. By dusk, I couldn't bear it any longer. I went to the river that cut through the valley, a ribbon of silver beneath the moon. The air was cool, the water singing softly over stones. I knelt by the river bank, staring at my reflection. A woman I hardly recognized, dirt-streaked, sunburned, eyes hollowed by fear. You didn't do it, I whispered to myself. You didn't. But my voice shook, because even I was starting to doubt whether innocence could survive so much hate. That's when I heard him behind me. You hide from ghosts, Taza said softly. I turned. He stood in the shadows, arms crossed, face lit by moonlight. Barefoot, silent, like the night itself. I don't hide, I said weakly. I'm just tired. He came closer, crouching beside me. His presence was calm, but strong, the way a mountain feels when you lean against it. My people say, he murmured, when spirit carry too much fear, it must speak or it die. I stared at him, and for the first time, I wanted to tell someone everything. The confession, I didn't kill him, I began, my voice shaking. Captain Harrow. He came to my cabin that night. He was drunk, said he needed to talk about peace with your people. He said he would ride out to meet one of your scouts. Taza's eyes flickered. Scout from my tribe? I don't know. He said it was secret and that no one else could know. He left before dawn. The next morning they found his horse covered in blood, and me, with his map on my table. I swallowed hard. I think someone planted it there. Someone wanted war. The soldiers didn't ask questions. They just wanted someone to blame. Silence fell between us. The river whispered, The stars seemed to hold their breath. I ran because I was scared, I continued. I thought maybe if I found your people, I could prove I didn't betray him. Taza's jaw tightened. He stood slowly, pacing by the water's edge. The moonlight traced the lines of his face, the tension in his shoulders. You speak truth? He asked quietly. Yes. He turned toward me, his eyes deep as the canyon itself. Then why you cry? My chest ached. Because no one believes me. He looked up at the stars for a long moment, then back at me. And what he said next made my breath stop. I believe. Then tonight will be sacred. He stepped closer, so close I could feel his breath warm against the night air. You tell truth, he said softly. Spirit no. Eyes no lie. He reached out, his fingers brushing away a tear from my cheek. His touch was careful, reverent, almost trembling. Among my people, he said, when a woman speaks truth under moon, it becomes sacred. Her pain, her fear, her words, they belong to the stars. His gaze held mine, unblinking. You confess your innocence, he said. Then tonight will be sacred. The world seemed to fall away. No soldiers, no war, no lies. Only his voice, steady and certain, carrying something ancient, something I didn't understand but deeply felt. I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall freely. For the first time, they weren't tears of fear but of release. He took a small pouch from around his neck, opened it, and scattered fine white powder, sacred ash, into the river. The water shimmered as it carried it downstream. Now the river carry your truth, he said. No man can take it away. I looked up at him, trembling. Why are you helping me? He hesitated, then said simply, because spirits say, when storm take everything, what remain must be protected. For a long time, neither of us moved. The air between us was alive, heavy with unspoken feeling, something both tender and forbidden. And though he didn't touch me again, I felt something pass between us. A vow made without words. Wot Arlo 5. The Sacred Night. The rest of the night blurred into dreams. I sat by the river until dawn, watching the stars fade into pale blue light. I could still feel his presence even after he was gone, calm, protective, like the earth itself had wrapped me in its arms. Something had changed, not just between us, but within me. The guilt, the fear, the shame, they were still there, but lighter somehow. As if his belief had given me back a piece of myself I thought was lost forever. When I returned to camp, Nita smiled at me knowingly. She touched my shoulder and whispered, "Sacred night." The words sent a shiver down my spine. Because now I understood. In his world, confession was not weakness. It was cleansing. Truth was holy. And that night, by the river beneath the stars, my truth had been witnessed, not by men, but by the sacred. But even as I felt peace for the first time in months, I knew the world outside this valley would not rest. The soldiers were coming, and soon, my innocence would be tested again, not before spirits or stars, but before blood and fire. The morning after that sacred night, everything felt sharper. The air, the light, even the sound of the wind through the canyon. It was as if the world had listened to my confession and was holding its breath. But peace never lasts long on the border between two worlds. 1. The smoke on the horizon. I was helping Nita hang hides to dry when I saw it, a faint gray ribbon in the distance. Smoke. Too dark to be a campfire. Taza saw it too. His body went still, every muscle alert. He called to the scouts, and within minutes half the men were on horseback, riding toward the ridge. The old chief's face turned to stone. "Soldiers," he said. "They come." My blood ran cold. "For me?" I whispered. No one answered, but the silence was enough. I felt it deep in my bones. The storm was coming, and I was its reason. The weight of guilt. By midday, the camp was in motion. Women packed food and water. Warriors prepared their weapons. Drums echoed low and steady through the valley like the heartbeat of the earth. Taza found me near the river, staring at the reflection of that same smoke curling higher in the sky. "You must go," I said quietly. "If they find me here, they'll kill you all." He shook his head, his dark eyes fierce. "You are under my protection. Spirits, no break, promise." "Spirits can't stop bullets," I snapped, fear twisting my voice. "You should have let me die that night." He stepped forward, his voice low and sharp. "No woman who speak truth die by my hand." For a moment I saw anger in him, not toward me but toward the world that made this choice impossible. Then it softened. "You still afraid," he said. "But fear not same as guilt." I wanted to believe him. But the guilt was heavy, real. If men died because of me, what good was my truth? The betrayal, revealed. By dusk, the scouts returned. Their faces were grim. One of them threw something to the ground before Taza, a tattered coat. Blue, a Union soldier's coat, and inside the pocket, a folded map. My map. The same one that had been stolen from my cabin weeks ago. My heart froze. Taza opened it carefully, then looked at me. "You know this?" "Yes," I whispered. "That's the captain's map." "But how?" The chief stepped closer, eyes burning. "You bring death," he said. "You bring them here." I shook my head desperately. "No, someone took that from me, someone from the fort. They want to start war between you and them." The old man didn't move. His silence was worse than shouting. Then Taza spoke, voice calm but edged with fire. "We find truth, no more words." He motioned for me to follow. The others formed a circle, a silent tribunal beneath the crimson sky. The trial of spirits, they called it the test of fire. 2 fires were lit, one pure flame, one dark with smoke, a symbol of truth and lies. Taza explained quietly as he led me to the center. "You speak truth, you walk through smoke. If spirit protect you, no harm. If lie, you burn." I stared at the flames, my heart hammering. "You can't believe this." "Not believe," he said. "No." The entire camp watched in silence. The heat licked at my skin, sweat beading on my neck. I took one step forward, whispering to myself, "You're innocent. You're innocent." Then I walked through. The smoke curled around me, hot, stinging, choking, but I didn't stop. I kept walking until I stepped out the other side, coughing, tears streaming down my face. When I turned back, the flames behind me burned lower, quieter. The crowd murmured. The chief's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, he didn't look angry. He looked uncertain. Taza approached, his gaze steady. "Spirits choose," he said softly. "They know truth." I collapsed to my knees, trembling. For a moment, all I could hear was the crackle of fire and my own heartbeat. Then Taza knelt beside me, his hand resting over mine. "Now they cannot touch you," he said, "not even death." The storm breaks, but fate had its own trial waiting. A horn blared in the distance, sharp, metallic. Then came the thunder of hooves. Soldiers. The camp erupted into chaos. Warriors grabbed rifles and bows, women gathered children and supplies. The air filled with shouts, smoke, and fear. I turned to Taza, panic rising in my throat. "You have to let me go. If they think I'm here, they'll destroy everything." But he didn't move. He stared at me as if memorizing my face. Then he said quietly, "If I let you go, you die. If I keep you, my people die. So I fight for both." Before I could speak, he was gone, mounting his horse and riding toward the canyon's mouth where the soldiers were already appearing like ghosts out of dust. Gunfire echoed. Horses screamed. I ran to the edge of the valley, watching the clash unfold. Apache riders weaving through smoke, soldiers shouting orders. My heart tore with every shot, every flash of fire. Then I saw him, Taza, thrown from his horse as a bullet struck near his shoulder. Something inside me broke. Without thinking, I ran. Through smoke. Through gunfire. through the chaos that once terrified me. I reached him just as he fell near the riverbank. "No," I cried, kneeling beside him, pressing my hands against the wound. "You can't leave me, not now." His breath came shallow but steady. He looked up at me, eyes burning with that same calm strength. "You live," he whispered. "You carry truth." "Not without you," I sobbed. He smiled faintly, the same quiet, knowing smile from that night by the river. Then tonight, sacred again. And before I could answer, the sky split open with thunder and rain poured down, quenching the flames. The soldiers retreated, driven back by the storm and the fury of the Apache. When the battle ended, I sat beside Taza, the rain washing the blood from his skin. His eyes were closed, but his hand was still warm in mine. Between death and dawn, by the time dawn came, the valley was silent. The soldiers were gone. The tribe had survived, wounded but alive. Taza lay among the healers, feverish but breathing. The chief came to me, eyes no longer hard but heavy with something like respect. "You walk through fire," he said. "You not lie." Then he touched his hand to his chest, the Apache gesture of honor. "You one of us now." I looked at Taza then, his face pale but peaceful. I realized that no matter what the world outside would say, I had found my truth here, in pain, in blood, in sacred fire. And though the storm had nearly destroyed us, it had also baptized something new, something pure, the kind of truth that no bullet could kill. The storm passed as quickly as it came, leaving behind a silence that felt almost holy. The valley was washed clean and of smoke, of blood, of everything except the scent of rain and earth. When the first light of dawn touched the hills, I sat beside Taza's bed, holding his hand, listening to the slow rhythm of his breath. Each rise and fall felt like a fragile thread tying me to this world. Between life and spirit, he had been shot through the shoulder, the wound deep, torn by shrapnel. The healers said he was strong, that his spirit fought to stay, but I could see the pain behind his closed eyes. All through the night I whispered prayers I barely believed in, prayers to his gods, to mine, to anything that might listen. "You can't leave me," I whispered. "You're the only one who believed me." Outside, the camp was quiet. The chief had declared a mourning silence for the dead. Smoke from funeral fires rose into the pale sky, carrying their spirits home. When Taza finally stirred, I leaned close. His voice was faint but sure. "You still here?" I laughed softly through tears. "Where else would I go?" "Back," he murmured, eyes fluttering open. "Your people wait. My people think I'm dead." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it in his eyes. The understanding that I had no home left except this place, this valley, this moment beside him. "Then stay," he said quietly, "but not as captive, as truth." The chief's judgment. By midday, the chief summoned me. I entered his lodge with my heart trembling. The air was heavy with incense and the faint hum of distant chants. He sat cross-legged by the fire, the lines of age deep in his face. His voice was low, grave. "Many die," he said, "but storm takes soldiers, not us. You bring both death and life." I lowered my gaze. "I never wanted either," he nodded slowly. "Spirits test all hearts. Yours strong." Then he gestured toward the horizon. "World outside no understand our ways. If you stay, you live by them. No lies, no fear, only truth." I hesitated. "And if I go?" He stared into the fire. "Then war come again. They hunt you and we cannot protect. You must choose, world of men or world of spirits." When I left his lodge, I felt the weight of two worlds on my shoulders. Taza had once said that fear and guilt were not the same, but now I felt both pressing in like shadows. The choice, that evening, I walked alone to the river, the same place where I had confessed my innocence beneath the stars, the same place he had called sacred. The water was clear now, reflecting the pink and gold of the dying sky. I could see my reflection, and his beside it, though he wasn't there. The memory of that night played like a whisper in my mind. "Then tonight will be sacred." Those words had changed everything. They had turned fear into faith, shame into strength, and now I understood what he had meant. Sacred wasn't about gods or rituals. It was about truth, about the courage to be seen for who you really are. Footsteps behind me broke the silence. Taza, pale, still weak, but walking. He sat beside me, wincing slightly as he moved his arm. "You should rest," I said softly. "I rest too long," he replied. We sat together without speaking for a long time, watching the sun sink behind the cliffs. The air smelled of rain and cedar. "Your father wants me to choose," I said finally. "Stay here or leave." He nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "You no belong to their world anymore. And do I belong to yours?" He turned to me then, his expression unreadable. "You belong to truth. That is enough." My heart ached. "Truth doesn't build a home, Taza." He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and brushed my hair from my face. "It builds spirit. Spirit never die." For the farewell, that wasn't. The next morning, I packed what little I had. A blanket, a necklace Nita had given me, a small pouch of herbs. I told myself I would go. Back to the world, back to whatever pieces of my life still existed. When I went to say goodbye, Taza stood waiting by the canyon's edge, his arm in a sling, his face calm as stone. "You go," he said simply. "You're not going to stop me? If I stop you, I steal your spirit. If you stay because of me, not truth, then tonight not sacred." His words cut through me like wind through glass. I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was sorrow. And something deeper, something holy. I took his hand, pressing it to my heart. "Then promise me one thing," I whispered. "That when you look at the stars, you'll remember me." He smiled faintly. "You know, understand. When I look at stars, I see you." Tears filled my eyes. I turned before I could lose my courage and began walking toward the canyon, toward whatever future waited beyond. But halfway there, I stopped. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and smoke, the same scent as that night by the river. The same feeling that had made my soul tremble, and in that moment I knew. The world I was walking toward had never believed in truth, never believed in sacred things. But here, in this valley, among these people with him, truth was life. I turned back. Taza was still standing there, watching me. He didn't smile this time, didn't move. He simply opened his arms, and when I ran to him. The sacred dawn, we never spoke of the soldiers again, or of the fort, or of the world that once tried to break me. Instead, we built something quiet, something real. A small hut near the river, where the sound of water became our hymn. Every dawn, we would sit together and watch the first light touch the cliffs. He would whisper old words in his tongue, prayers of gratitude, of remembrance. And sometimes he would look at me and say softly, "Still sacred." At first, I thought he meant the night I confessed. But in time I understood. He meant every day that we lived without lies, without fear. The world outside would never know my name again. They would say I vanished into the desert. Maybe that's true. But I found something the world could never give. Peace. When I close my eyes now, I still see that night. The river shining under moonlight. The fire reflected in his eyes. The weight of his words. "You confessed your innocence," he had said. "Then tonight will be sacred." He was right. It was sacred. Not because I was innocent, but because he believed I was. Because for the first time someone saw the truth and called it holy. And as the sun rose over the red cliffs, I realized the sacred never ends at night. It begins again with every dawn.